I'm going to call up one of the gentlemen who's put us here, gave us this wonderful venue, and is always supporting from the beginning, and I'm sure he will be there till the very end, Mr. Nurumu.
Dumelang bagaetsho. I just hope that my voice projects at the back there. Can I be heard? Okay. One of the things that I always want to emphasize, based partly on the image we've cultivated in the Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom, is that we would like to enthuse, to energize, to inspire, and to empower. Enthuse, to energize, to inspire, and to empower. So if you are with me and you'd like to enjoy or experience any of those things, say yeah. Yeah. Okay, okay. All right, let me say all protocol observed. I'm privileged to be among very, very capable speakers. When speakers have spoken so well, you wonder whether you can really add any value. But I'll do the best that I can. I've mentioned to the organizers before, and I'll repeat, that whenever they invite me on a Sabbath like today, I'll make sure that whatever I share has an element of my, my religious faith in it. And for that reason, I'm going to be a little preachy, just a little bit, and touch on some aspects of the Bible that I think would help us as entrepreneurs. Are you for that idea? If you are, say yeah. Okay, I think I'm in the right crowd here. My entrepreneurial journey, as you know, has been full of ups and downs. I told you last time about the huge event, which I called a cataclysmic event that has catapulted me into entrepreneurship. But there are a lot of other events along the way that have pushed me where I am now and have put me in the position that we're in, where I have such a wonderful group of people that I work with. A round of applause for my team. Some of them are at the back, who have assisted in putting all this event together. But it has not been all smooth sailing. And because I'm a farm boy, I call myself a farm boy because I'm a product of Makatanyane, which is a farm, where we used to go every weekend as we were going to school. And I told you the whole story last time. I'm also a product of another cattle post, Mahumalebe, where we grew up. So one of the stories that fascinates me to no end is the story of David. The story of David in the Bible fascinates me because it deals with a farm boy and how he changed the world, how he changed the fate of a nation. And today I'm going to share that story of David, but not from the usual angle which you've heard from Sunday school when you are children, and not from the angle that you had when you were at Sabbath school, some of you who are Adventists, but from a slightly different angle where perhaps it's a bit more nuanced, it's a bit more meaty, in the sense that I'll give you a slightly different perspective from the usual. We know that when we read 1 Samuel, the book of 1 Samuel, more particularly from 1 Samuel chapter 17, that the story is told about this huge giant in the form of Goliath, and how Goliath was daring the army of God to take him on. He actually dared them to select one fighter to meet him on the battle. And we are told in the story that David was very brave and he's the only one who came forward. Yes, that is true. But there's a bigger element to the story which I'd like to share with you, and which, in my view, speaks to entrepreneurship and ties in beautifully with my title for this morning's discussion. And the title is, What is the price? What is the reward? Okay? And that is a bastardization of the phrase which is in the Bible, which says, what is the reward for the man who kills Goliath. And I'm going to paraphrase it in the sense of saying, what is the reward for the entrepreneur who kills and murders and destroys their personal Goliaths? What is the gain that you will end up having if you are prepared to face your Goliaths? Who are your Goliaths? Your Goliaths are your challenges. That huge negative force that is always coming up against you. That is your Goliath. Some of you, it could be emerging from a broken marriage. Some of you could be being victims of a cyber attack. Any number of things, but we all have our Goliaths. Is that correct? Okay. So what I'm really asking you to do is to dream. I'm asking you to focus on your dream. And where do I get this from? I get it from verse 27. Verse 26. If I can be a little preachy for a little bit. David, after he had come there almost accidentally, having been sent by his father Jesse to send food to his brothers. You remember that part? And then Goliath comes out and dares the armies of Israel. And he had been doing that for 40 straight days. Saying, come forward, basically you pieces of chicken. Come forward, who can take me on? And then David had just heard this. At verse 26 of chapter 17, he says, David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And then he's interested in the reward. And then he mentioned this again at verse 26. He keeps asking. He goes around in the camp. And I had the privilege of going to Israel in 2017. And I actually went to the place where this battle took place. If I could just digress for a little bit. When you grow up, you have little experiences as you grow up. And then when you get to where I am, you're able to connect the dots. I mentioned to you last time that it was Steve Jobs who says, it's only later that you connect the dots backwards. So these were some of the little dots that I was connecting. I had this desire to go to Israel, partly because I had heard this story as a child and I wanted to see where it took place. And then we had this guide, his name was Yehuda Israel, and believe it or not, he was a Zimbabwean. And this Zimbabwean had studied Hebrew, and he had mastered Hebrew to the point that he had spent the last 17 or so years taking a group of Adventists and other believers and people from other denominations, taking them to Israel. And 2017 was my turn with my pastor. We went there, and we actually went to the hill where this beautiful battle took place. You could see literally where the Philistine army was encamped and where the Israeli army was encamped. And in fact, I had the privilege of picking those stones. You remember in the story that David went and picked those 5 stones and put them, and then he used one of them to slay Goliath. But anyway, so I'm connecting the dots and I'm trying to understand, why am I really fascinated about this story? I told you that I experienced this cataclysmic event which threw me off. I faced the possibility of losing my profession and as a lawyer, which means literally we wouldn't have any of these other businesses. We'd have ended it here. And even that would have been a short story. But now, because of the fact that I was able to wrestle with my Goliaths, as I shall demonstrate now in a minute, we are now able to talk about more companies and talk about a bigger enterprise. But anyway, I digress. The reason why this story has fascinated me to no end is that at a time when I was facing this cataclysmic event, I immersed myself into personal development, reading every book that I could read, getting hold of any biography that I could get hold of to inspire me, to motivate me, to empower me, like I've just said, to push me forward so that I can overcome this particular challenge. But in the midst of all that, I joined an organization called Amway. So I tried personal development through the route of Amway, because Amway was very strong on personal development. What they did is they distributed tapes. Those days, were they CDs? Oh yeah, CDs were just getting in as well. Tapes and CDs which were prescribed reading, and then they also gave you books. So because of this personal development element, I really got into it. For a period of 9 months, I was an Amway distributor, and for those who might be interested, I got as far as 21%. I needed to go a lot further to reach the stage of being a ruby, and then a diamond was way above me. But in those 9 months, we used to drive, me and my wife, to, it's not Monte Casino, the other casino, I'm trying to remember the name of the casino. We used to go there to Joburg almost every other weekend to listen to speakers. Speakers used to come from as far afield as United States to come to talk to us. I've had the privilege of meeting speakers such as John Maxwell, meeting them, you know, and having a chat with them and having them autograph their books, you know. It was very exciting in the early thousands, those sort of experiences. And one of the speakers that I had to encounter through that experience was a gentleman called Doug Weed. And Doug Weed is the one that introduced me to this different angle to the story of David, the nuanced angle, where the focus is on the reward. You look at verse 25, you look at verse 26, you look at verse 27, and you look at verse 30. Verse 30, after he keeps asking the same question, what is the reward for the man who kills Goliath? He goes around the camp, and then he goes, verse 30, now this is for the 4th time. He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. He had to hear it 4 times. Okay? So I'm here to say to you, David, yes, was inspired by the fact that he loved God. Yes, he wanted to save his nation, Israel, from bondage. Yes, he was fed up with the idea of this monstrous character in Goliath who was defying the armies of Israel. But ultimately, he asked 4 times, what is the reward for the man who kills Goliath? He was told that you get to marry the prince, okay? You get to marry the princess, you get to be declared a prince, you get to have your taxes wiped out. Imagine not paying any taxes for the rest of your life. He was told that basically the man who kills Goliath will be experiencing heaven on earth, you know, and he kept imagining marrying this princess. Of course, later we know that he was betrayed by Saul, and Saul tried to swap a different princess from the one that he had in mind. But that's a matter for another day. Now, during that time, I came to embrace this notion. And yes, the name of the casino is Gold Reef City. That's where we used to go. It had slipped my mind. So Doug Weeds pointed or drew my attention to this aspect that often as Botswana, we tend to be a little bit shy about. I want entrepreneurs to basically be open and direct and work on their dream. Ask themselves, what is the reward for basically overcoming your fear of public speaking, if that is your Goliath? What is the reward for basically hunkering down and spending all the time you need to spend reading on your area of specialization? What is the reward for becoming an industry expert in your special area that you have chosen, as some of the speakers were encouraging you to do, to focus? If you can identify that, basically identify your purpose, asked around the idea of a prize. What is the prize? The prize with ZE at the end, not CE. And there's a big difference. Prize ZE means the reward. Prize CE means how much, what is the amount? For those who might not know those little differences. But what is the price for overcoming the thing that is stopping you from wrestling with it, with whatever difficulty you are facing? And And there's a gentleman called Malcolm Gladwell. Who knows about Malcolm Gladwell? He's written a book like Blink, and he's the man who introduced that to 10,000 hours. Basically, the basic notion of Malcolm Gladwell is that you have to spend 10,000 hours at anything that you undertake for you to become an expert. And his argument, and which I agree with him, is that if you devote 10,000 hours to anything, you can actually become an expert, an industry expert at that thing. So anyway, he also wrote a book called David and Goliath. And it is that book that really sort of completed my understanding of the David and Goliath story. And his argument is that if you look at history, you'll see that history is replete with instances where the underdog won. His argument is that if you analyze it closely, the underdog always wins. There's a perception in our minds that, you know, it is Semamang who can do it, we can't do it. We're always underplaying ourselves because in the real culture, especially in my culture as a Botswana, re na le go dumela gore batho ba bangwe ba botoka go na le rona. Re na le go dumela gore go na le bo Goliath ko ba leng gore ke bone ba tshwanetseng ke dilo tse di rileng gore gaisa. But Malcolm Gladwell's argument is that if for a moment you can suspend that logic or that type of thinking and substitute it with this thinking that the underdog always wins. If you go to Greek mythology and look at the stories of Hercules, look at all the other stories in Greek mythology, you find that it's always the small guy who wins. If you go to any successful blockbuster Hollywood movie, you'll always see that it's the guy who is really had it at the beginning who wins. If you look at entrepreneurship in its purest form and see who actually makes it, who reaches the top. For instance, if you study the top 10 wealthiest people on the planet as of now, you see that most of them are first-generation non-entities. They did not inherit their wealth. They started from nothing, which means they're underdogs, just like David was. They're underdogs, just like you and I are, insofar as meeting the challenges of your time, meeting the challenges of your industry, insofar as wrestling and confronting the Goliaths in your life. If you are with me, say yeah. Yeah. Okay, louder. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I wanted to be sure you are listening. Sometimes when you are sitting behind those masks, you don't know really if you are talking to people or what. The new normal has really caused us a problem. Okay, so I would argue that successful entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurship is also about a series of overcoming the improbable. It's a series of improbable or unlikely victories and overcoming what sometimes seems like insurmountable odds. It's not for nothing that the man who we revere the most as the greatest statesman of all time, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, is renowned for this statement. It is always seems impossible until it's done. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela says it always seems impossible until it is done. In other words, any situation that you're confronted with, any Goliath that comes your way, any challenge that you are faced with will always seem insurmountable until you face it. And I always talk to the younger entrepreneurs, the ones that follow me on social media and the ones that come and meet me at the restaurants. I have a cohort of entrepreneurs who I mentor. And this is the picture that I'm always presenting to them. And I would be doing a disservice if I leave this talk without going back to this, where this is the equilateral triangle. Okay, mine is not so equal, but this is the equilateral triangle of success as I understand it. Desire, okay, which is where we are with the dream, okay, which is what David kept asking 4 times throughout chapter 17. What is the price? He couldn't believe it. For the man, he wasn't bothered with how huge Goliath was. He wasn't bothered with the fact that Goliath had been fighting since his youth. Like Saul tried to remind him, look, this man has been fighting since his youth. You are just but a boy. You know? His focus was, look, I've killed a bear. I've killed a lion with my bare hands. I can take it on. So you should be able to say, when a difficult situation confronts you, when that licensing officer refuses to grant you a license, or he equivocates or vacillates or subjects you to endless amounts of tele over a license that you know you are entitled to, you should be able to say, this is an uncircumcised Philistine. Huh? I cannot stand this. You should have a bigger dream that overcomes that with what you intend. What will I benefit from this license? What is my prize? What is my ultimate goal? You'll have done what she had advised you to do. You'll have identified your strengths. You'll have also identified what your key deliverables are and your goals. So this is going to catapult you. The desire, the dream, the prize. Okay, another way of putting it. Okay, and then of course, the other part of the triangle is faith. Which is why, you know, I'm here, I'm talking about my faith. But the faith here, I'm talking about almost in the mechanical sense. That extra something that drives you. That indomitable faith. That refusal to believe that the odds are stacked up against you. That refusal to accept defeat. That persistency. That very trait that David and Goliath speaks about in his famous book, The Magic of Perseverance. That aspect of perseverance. It is your faith and your belief in yourself. Sometimes you almost have to be idiotic and stupid. You'll be surrounded by relatives, sometimes people you love, sometimes people you share a bed with, somebody you've just slept with. You wake up and he tells you, when I will you know? You are a dreamer. So you need this faith to overcome that negativity, okay? That thing, even Jesus himself says in the good book that a prophet is without honor at his own home. You'll be without honor. Nobody is going to take you seriously. Believe me, even when you wanted to come to this event and somebody showed you who the speakers are, I'm sure 3 or 4 people say, what is that 200 pulaga? Huh? You're going to waste your time. You could be going to the mall. You could be with so-and-so. You could be doing this and that. So you need this faith to push you through during these hard times once you've identified the price. And then, of course, the most important part, arguably, which is massive action. Okay? This is indomitable faith. Never mind the spelling. This is burning desire. Please, it's not about spelling right now. So, all these things work together. So, let me just wrap it up towards the conclusion. So, we go back to 1 Samuel chapter 17, and we look at those 4 verses, and we ask ourselves, how can we ensure that we overcome those obstacles? How can we use our total obsession with the price, with the reward? Okay? Yes, it is good to be able to drive a fancy car at some point, but that is not enough, in my view, to drive you. It is good to be able to have fancy houses, but that may be not enough to drive you. It's only you who uniquely knows what your purpose is and what is it ultimately you want. These material things, yes, they can help you in terms of identifying your markers and identifying whether you are in the right direction. But ultimately, you need to have that overwhelming purpose. For instance, I have simplified mine. I've said to you that my purpose is to enthuse, to energize, to inspire, and to empower. I want every interaction with my audience to be like that. Every interaction with my employees to be like that. Every interaction with my buyers, my sellers, even people who come to our restaurant, even people who use our law firm. I want every interaction to be an empowering one so that I can be able to help more people and broaden my ability to to have an effective brand. Just to quote what my cousin, he didn't say it, but he's the son of my cousin, Taul. But I mean, what I'm saying to you, just as I wrap up, is that identify the price and ask yourself, what is the price for me as an entrepreneur for slaughtering and killing Goliath? I never want to conclude without saying a little joke. So as I conclude, let's share a little joke, and please promise me you're going to laugh, even if it's unfunny. Yeah, because if you don't laugh, I mean, guys, after a presentation like that, and then I'm embarrassed to my seat, that would not be right. Okay, you know how they say that A students always end up working for C or D students? In other words, entrepreneurs. There's an element of truth in that, you know, because there's also an element of truth that says if you are the smartest guy in the room, then you are in trouble, which means you need a lot of those A's around you to push you forward. But here's a joke which accords with that saying. You know, this guy, he had gone to school. There's guy A and guy B. So guy A was very, very smart. So he had a big corporate job. But guy B seems to be just winning and getting things done and going places, the holidays he takes, the family, the success. And then guy A, he knows he's much brighter than this guy. He knows this guy is really an idiot. But this idiot is making it. So he comes to him, Mona, tata, when how come you're so successful? We're not getting anywhere. Why? And then the guy B, the guy who's not so smart, he says, no, you know, all I do is ensure that I buy X items, or let's call them widgets. I buy widgets for 2 pula, and then I sell those widgets for 4 pula. That is my trick, you know. He says, really? That is all? Yes. All I do is that I make sure that I raise everything that I sell by 2%. That's all. It shows he's not a smart guy.
Another big round of applause for Mr.